All right, I'm back from another productive stint outside of making these tutorials. I've actually finished the basics of this plane and I actually made it available for sale on the xplane.org's online store, which is accessible from www.xplane.org, and you can get it here. And there's also a support forum, and people are even, I just saw some people publishing libraries for this plane, which is really awesome. Lots of feedback and comments and improvement suggestions already, which is great. I love that community feedback. And I personally am wanting to get back into the tutorials to catch up on all the stuff that I've been working on to get this plane out there. So if you're interested, you can purchase it. You'd be supporting me in my efforts of doing these tutorials. And let's take a look at what we got here. This plane features manipulators, and I've showcased those already in my past tutorials, how those work. And I actually showcased in my last two tutorials how all of these manipulators had to be hacked in a text file that was exported from Blender in order to get them to work. Well, that ended up being quite the task. So I ended up trying to contribute to updating that script that was published to convert Blender objects to X-Plane objects and allow for the use of these manipulators and programmed parts to be exported to that text file so that I wouldn't have to always hack that text file. And that ended up saving me a lot of time in development. So the result is you have buttons and knobs that are click and draggable or just plain clickable. And it's actually really nice. It takes some getting used to, but once you're used to it, I programmed these buttons and these knobs in such a way that you can either drag them up and down or left and right, and they pretty much have the same effect. Let's turn on the strobes and the beacon light and the nav lights, and these are the landing lights, and this is the logo for the back vertical tail assembly, and then these are miscellaneous lights. Not everything is hooked up yet. Some data refs are ambiguous in their description and also in their functionality, so I was not able to do everything with manipulators. These, for example, are covered with transparent buttons that are textured with 2D buttons from the 2D cockpit. And if you click on them, it activates these buttons, but they aren't directly connected to each other. They're connected sort of a roundabout sort of way. Okay, so I can pull these covers off by clicking and dragging them down. And then again, these are not manipulated knobs. They're just simply textured with the 2D start knobs. And as such, you have two positions here. One, you hover your mouse a little bit to the right of the axis of this, and then you click. And that'll start your engine. So now I'm going to have to turn down the volume. I'll turn off all the sounds. And notice how there's also instructions that pop up if you have the Show Instrument Descriptions checkmark checked here in the aircraft menu. This button right here will fly your plane automatically for you. Faders for the lights, manipulator based, of course. Faders for the displays. I showcased some of this in my tutorials already. I won't walk through everything right now, but you have some other features here. For example, this is the radar panel that is used in the real plane, but it doesn't have equivalent functionality in X-Plane, so I decided to hook up functionality to it, like for example, speed up the simulator. And here you can also actually hide the pilot, which if you look down here and I press this button, the pilot gets hidden. So for some people that want to, for example, access these buttons and knobs here, can simply hide the pilot and those things become accessible, like the speed brakes. These knobs do work. If I pull this up, that locks the aileron for me. I can't move left and right anymore. If I pull this up, it locks the entire control column. And to release it, I can either click this button or push this back in, and we're back online. Same thing goes for this gust lock here. If the gust lock is activated, you can't move the throttles forward. If it's deactivated, the throttles will respond to both joystick and mouse click and drag. One point I should really go into more depth describing is this radio management unit right here. It is not set up in the way that usually X-Plane instruments are set up, but I did not use a plugin to do this. I used a combination of generic instruments and default instruments that were mapped with different textures, and also some 3D objects that flip around and do all sorts of crazy stuff in 3D space when these buttons are pressed and stuff like that. So we have COM1 and COM2 that's accessible if you click it again. Nav1 and Nav2, same thing here. And wherever this box is, that's where you can tune the frequency. Tuning in big increments is done by dragging vertically, and fine-tuning is done by dragging horizontally. Notice how the last decimal places are a lot more manageable that way. So that's how the radios are set. Pretty straightforward the way that works. And then there's some other manipulators that I should point out to you. It's these autopilot manipulators. What we have here is knobs that have combination functions. You can either click on the center of this knob, dragging up and down, and what you'll see is this number here changing. If you want to fine-tune that, you can also click left, drag left and right, so you'll have a finer increments. And you can do the same thing with the altitude, and same principle applies. But then there's also invisible regions that show only one arrow plus or minus, and those are the old-fashioned ways of accessing these features. You can then click and hold them, and they will behave the way that they would in a 2D cockpit. And then the autopilot works pretty much the way every autopilot in X-Plane works, other than this plane doesn't have auto throttle, so the speed and flight level change buttons are dependent on the pilot's throttle setting. Alright, so we've got the engines running, and let's get this bird up in the air. I tried to calibrate it in such a way that it requires minimal trim. You also have the option of trimming stuff here. You can either click and drag up and down to affect the trim pretty linearly, or you can affect the trim by clicking and holding. There's the landing gear going in. You can see the lights. If I hit my shortcut for lights, you see that they're textured and they have those halo effects around them too. So you can obviously see that better when it's dark. So nicely animated fan blades. I tried to make them as unjerky as possible, meaning that their rotation should be pretty smooth. And there's also tons of animations just around all the wings and everything. So we've got wing flex going on. We've got the elevators. There's 4 tabs on the inside of the elevators. The 2 inner tabs are hooked up, hardwired to the pilot's control column. The outer tabs go through a computer first, and they increase their deflection with plane's speed, and that is designed to reduce the load on the elevator. We also have a reverse thrust here, which is deployed with the period key on the keyboard, and the pilot is programmed to respond to both control inputs as well as to the horizon line. He tries to keep his eyes on the horizon line. You can also turn on windshield wipers, and these wipers have the feature that they sort of hug the windshield. You notice them curving around the windshield a little bit. That is animated into the blades. This plane also comes with a library kit. It's basically a transparent template that allows you to use it as a layer in Photoshop and paint your own scheme underneath it. And what that does is it retains all your rivets and all the shading and everything that I've painted into this plane already. And I mean, you can choose to delete it and do your own if you want, but at least it serves as some sort of a guide for painting. So with that kit, I've put together just the American Eagle livery. This ERJ140 model is only ever sold to American Eagle and Chautauqua Airlines. There's no other airlines that fly the 140, but I made an Air France livery. Just it would be a fictional livery in that sense, but I just made this one to test out the livery kit, and it worked pretty well. And then there's a plain white livery as well. And they all come with night textures too. So if it's dark, you'll see the logo illuminated in the back there. And you can also unilluminate that or switch that logo off with this switch here. Well, there's one more thing I wanted to show you. I'd almost forgotten. This is the field of view manipulator, and it allows you to set the field of view of this plane, which is normally accessed in the rendering options right here. And it's handier to be able to control the field of view like this, because that way you can quickly determine which is the right setting for all the instruments to show up on your screen and to have everything be as legible as possible. Well, this is not meant to be an exhaustive video on this plane, definitely not a training video. I just wanted to say that I'm intending to continue on with the tutorials. I'm just taking a little bit of a break now again, since I'm dealing with a lot of customer support relating to this plane. And a lot of feature requests, tons, like more than I'd probably have to split my time now between trying to implement all those feature requests and continuing on with these tutorials. So that's what I want to do. Thank you very much for your patience. Thanks for holding out for the next couple tutorials. I got some good stuff coming. We don't have to deal with those text files anymore. The script has been updated. We're going to be able to work with manipulators directly in Blender, and that's a huge relief. It's definitely a much better way of doing things. So there you go. That's all for now. I hope to be back with more tutorials fairly soon. Thanks again.